the real truth of who you are comes from a different kind of exploration into yourself, into the essence of who you are. And very intentionally separating the self, right? Because we don't learn how to do that. And I am 42 years old, and I will say that there are different pieces of me that I've known throughout my life that are me. But until you let go of the conditioning, until you really separate the self from the conditioning, from the others, from the expectations, from culture, you don't really understand the essence of who you are. When we think about, for example, self-care, when we think about actually looking within, that somehow it's selfish, especially as women. It's looking outwards and taking care of everybody else. That's what we're supposed to do. But it's interesting because once you actually give yourself that time, take some of that energy that normally goes outward and put it to yourself, you actually become not just better for yourself, you become better for everybody else too.
This is Emily Harmon, host of the Onward podcast. In this podcast, we talk about facing adversity and moving forward and discovering ourselves along the way. Self-mastery and self-empowerment. These two ingredients are the foundations of Margie's recipe for success in every endeavor and in the face of every obstacle. And it's the basis for all of Margie's work and what she offers to others. As an empowerment and liberation coach, Margie challenges and supports clients who want to break free from social and business conventions to live and lead boldly. And in doing so, clients realize their potential, dare to be and do more than they ever allowed themselves, and design meaningful and intentional experiences that serve their life purpose and create impact in all areas of their lives. This is a recording of a live episode that we did back in February of 2021. And I'm excited to bring it to you today as just a regular podcast episode. So we talk in this episode about Margie's childhood and the trauma that she experienced. So I want to give you a heads up in case you might find that triggering. Just wanted to let you know that that's a piece of what we talk about in this episode. Let's get to the interview. Okay, Margie, we're live.
Yay!
Welcome to the Onward podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for the opportunity, Emily.
I think it was Michael Paterano who introduced us, if I remember correctly. He's always like sending me a LinkedIn message. You got to meet this person. You got to meet that person.
Yes, I think Laura Cobb had
Laura too.
Yes.
Laura, yeah, was it Laura? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, Laura's awesome too. She's doing the same thing, introducing me to so many people.
Yes,
and, I like that. So you're a cultural anthropologist, and your research has focused on gender in non-traditional contexts.
Yes.
And that's something that when we first met and we started talking about, I just really loved all the work that you've done in that area. You've met and done research on some very interesting topics.
Yes. And it's all been about really like primarily looking at women in the non-traditional context, which for me are very interesting. And they're all about women in situations where they have to use physical force. So if you think of martial arts, if you think of combat, if you think of, and also like just where they're using their body in ways in which our society does not necessarily agree that is a place or a context for women. Bodybuilding is another one. It's the one that more recently I've been very attuned to in my own personal experience and as a researcher, as a filmmaker as well, to really understand like, wow, this is like fascinating to me. Like the human body is such a powerful vessel and tool, everything from the kinds of things that we can endure through our bodies, the, embodied trauma, and also motherhood. And like, there's just so much. And with bodybuilding, it's such a fascinating experience to see what your body can do, to see how your muscles grow, to see how your body leans out, to experiment with your body and see how it responds to different exercise protocols, to different types of the diet regimen too. And so it's, for me, I see that and I'm like, oh, this is so cool for myself. But as a context with bodybuilding, we in our society do not necessarily look fairly and fondly upon women who show muscle and women who have muscle. Very gendered, like we have this perception of women as being delicate and feminine, and the muscle on a woman is almost screaming the entire opposite. It's screaming strength. It's screaming masculinity. It's basically like what we're not supposed to be. And so learning about that context for myself, but also from other bodybuilders, including a lot of Olympian females, has been really, it's been such a wonderful experience to get an understanding of how they got there in the first place and what has been the growth that they've had to go through to get to be these just sculptures of what the human body can do, but it's, also as women.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Hi, Nino. Nino stopped by. I used to work with him, so thank you for stopping by, Nino. So the interesting thing about bodybuilding is you can actually see the results. And I'm in this coaching program right now where we're learning how to kind of tame our inner critic and our judge and, all the saboteurs that stop us from making progress. And when we work on our mind, it's not always as easily, I guess, it may be visible to others. If something that used to be your inner critic, you're able to tame it. But with bodybuilding, you can just actually see the muscles. Yours in your picture. You've been doing that? You've been bodybuilding too?
Yes. I've been doing that for a long time. So I've been doing strength training more than anything. And as bodybuilding specifically, it was a goal that I had before I had children. And then I moved to South Korea, moved to Australia, then had my child. And so it's kind of one of those goals that stayed, behind in the past. And after I had my son, so I've had, and this is part of, I guess we can lump a little bit of that period of becoming a mother, was this transition in my life where it was isolating because I was in another country, literally on the other side of the world. I was in Australia where I had my first child. And before I had her, I had 3 miscarriages. So being in a completely different country, not with my support system, going through this very different experience and difficult experience on my own without knowing others or seemingly not knowing others who had been through this, that feeling of brokenness and that feeling of my body. And from an embodied kind of standpoint, my body failing me. I'm young, I'm strong, I'm mentally healthy, I'm in a good place in my life, I have a good partner. Why is this happening? And not having an answer.
That's really
was very difficult for somebody who is, we want to have control over our lives. And that's not an experience where you can, right? It's completely out of your control, and kind of having to learn to surrender to that was very difficult. And then I had my daughter, and then had my son. I had a miscarriage before my son. And so there was another one of those of wow, I thought this was over. Okay. I've been through this before. I understand the process, and I just have to, again, by the 4th miscarriage, I was okay, I know the surrendering game now well.
Yeah.
It never gets easier, but it's a little bit, I think you bounce back a little bit faster, even though it was that many times. At least for me, it was. And then had my son, everything went well. And then when I was done doing all of the breastfeeding and all of that part of motherhood, I'm one of those unfortunate women who gains weight after she gives birth, not before. So I gained all the weight after, which was oh, come on. So this was at the beginning of 2018. I decided, okay, I am done with the baby having and the breastfeeding and all of that stuff. I want to get back to strengthening myself. And I will say that bodybuilding was, strength training was one of those areas where we don't get to, as women, we get told be exercise or exercise and be fit.
Right.
That's for pregnancy. But the kind of musculature that I had when I was pregnant with both of my children was so beneficial for me in having very uncomplicated pregnancies and having very good natural labor experiences. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that for me, I feel very proud that I was able to give that to myself and to my children by default. And I knew what I had to do. Like I knew the process. I've done strength training for a really long time. So I was like, okay, I know how to get back into the swing of things. And in fact, I ended up at the beginning of every year at that time, bodybuilding.com, which is one of the largest supplement companies in the United States, well, in the world, really. They used to have this, New Year's resolution kind of challenge, like transformation challenge. And I was like, well, I'm going to be doing this anyways for myself. I might as well, you never know, maybe I will, win some money in this competition.
Right.
And it was more like building the community around this goal that was very new to me. And I realized that I like inspiring other people, and other people were very inspired by me, just, being disciplined and dedicated. So over the course of 2018, one of the things that was part of that competition was having a social media presence. So I ended up opening an Instagram account and just basically documenting what I was doing. So as a researcher, I'm like, oh, this is fun, because then I get to see what I'm doing, see the progress, understand have an outlet for when I'm struggling. What am I struggling with? And what am I, how am I sharing these challenges with others so that they realize too, it's okay to have the struggle, get back up the next day and continue working towards your goals, which is good for fitness and is good for pretty much everything else in life. It was a really cool experiment. And halfway through the year, I realized, wow, I'm back in this place with my body where I am strong, I have muscle, and I could actually consider this old goal of competing in bodybuilding. And so I thought, sure, I'm going to give this a shot. So I brushed up that goal and said, okay, I'm going to compete at 40. So my first competition was in November of 2018. And lo and behold, I got first place in the master's category.
Wow.
Yes. So I was like, oh, that was such a cool experience. And in the process of doing that first prep for that competition, I learned so much about myself, about the things that I didn't realize I was going to take very easily to, like having somebody tell me what to eat and how much to eat, freed up so much mental space for me. And it's something that I would have immediately thought like, oh man, eating the same thing every day, or, having somebody else tell me what to eat and like not having the foods that I like or things like that. It really wasn't. I recognized that it gave me something that I never expected, which was just complete like mental space to do other things that were more important. And then the other thing too is I was meeting so many amazing women who were also working towards some kind of competition as a result of the social media aspect, and learning about their background, learning that they are veterans, they are physicians, they're engineers, they're all kinds of different women from all different backgrounds. And it's such a paradox, because when we think of bodybuilders, we think of narcissists. We think of people who are just superficial and just about their looks and, spend too much time in the gym and must have nothing else to do. All of these different stereotypes. And here I was getting to meet these amazing women with a lot of depth to their character and a lot of breadth of experiences. And I thought, wow, this is not the story that we know of bodybuilders. And I watched a lot of documentaries about bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I noticed is, first of all, obviously they're all focused on men. So I was like, I kind of would want to see more about what is women's experiences, because what I'm hearing is very different than what I hear from men's documentaries. And then the other part too was, okay, there's also something else missing. With documentaries about men, they talk about diet, they talk about training, they talk about the competition. They never get at the human story.
The personal side, yeah.
They never get at why are they doing this? And if you think about this, again, that paradox, as women and as people, but especially as women, the last thing that we want to be judged for is our bodies. We judge ourselves plenty. Yeah. So if you think about like voluntarily putting yourself up on the stage in a tiny bikini for a bunch of random people to be looking at you and judging your body, seems completely counterintuitive. And yet all of these women talk about how being on the stage is empowering. And to me, I was like, wow, this is so not the story that we know. What is behind that story? And part of it, Emily, really is bottom line on all that is in the process of prepping themselves for being on that stage. They have to let go of a lot of the criticism that comes from the outside. Why are you doing this? Why are you suffering? Why are you dieting? You're sacrificing, social time, and, why don't you have a drink? And, when you're really disciplined and committed to a goal, you have to battle all of the naysayers and everybody around you who doesn't either believe in your goal or doesn't believe in you or doesn't believe that you're doing something that is right for you.
So how did participating in that bodybuilding competition help you with achieving other goals in your life?
It allowed me to really start letting go of expectations. And I had done that in a lot of different ways. Like, for example, like even becoming an anthropologist in my family, like it is for many families, or many students, certainly, right? We have this very narrow path of what is the road to success in a career, right? You're a physician, you're an engineer, you're a nurse, those are, lawyer. You either are looking to have a career path where we consider it to be successful in our society in some way, whether it's with money or with job security, right? Yeah. And it's also very gendered too, those career paths. And so I started off as pre-med because, well, that's what my mom wanted to do. She wanted a doctor in the family. And I was school smart and I knew I could do it. And I was never grossed out by blood. I'm pretty fascinated by it. My daughter is kind of like that. But then I realized, I'm not doing this for me. It's probably the very first time on something major in my life that I realized I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for someone else. What do I really want for myself? And that being the first step towards what's really important to me as a person is understanding human behavior. And so as I reflected back of like, oh, that was the first time that I did that. How interesting. And now it was more bodybuilding and the things that I let go of was so much more in my field of awareness. Yeah. And it allowed me to reflect on a lot of the past stuff.
So how did your family react when you switched your major, right? I mean, how did they react? Did people judge you? Did you?
Yeah. And I would say that like even all the way to the end of even earning a PhD in anthropology, I've always had this kind of nagging complaint that they don't really know what I do. Yeah. I still don't know what I do. And I have a PhD. And it bothered me a lot when I was going through school because as a first generation college student, I really wanted that support. And I had to let go of that. I had to realize this is not that they're not supportive. It's not that they don't believe in me. It's that they don't understand what this context is like. They have no idea because they've never been through it themselves. And so understanding that for myself, right, allowed me to just be like, okay, it's not that I'm not worthy. It's not that, any number of things. It's simply that they don't understand and they don't know how to help. They don't know how to help.
That's really good that you were able to figure that out at such a young age. I mean, a lot of women in college don't really think that way, it seems to me. And you said when you submitted some information for this episode, you said, I'm no stranger. Well, you said, no, the appearance of confidence is different than being confident. To be confident requires self-love, self-compassion, and those can only be attained through persistent inner work. So have you done that inner work when you were in college or?
Yeah, you know what? I had been doing this inner work since I was a child, and I just didn't realize that. And I will say that I will tell you quite frankly, I didn't realize that I've been doing that inner work since I was 10 years old. I didn't realize it until the last few years. I didn't realize how far back I was doing that and how I had become cognizant of the things that I wanted to do for me as a person and for the world. I came from a very traumatic childhood. Unfortunately, there was just a lot of intergenerational trauma in my maternal family's side. And there's a lot of domestic violence and abuse and sexual abuse and a lot of physical and emotional abuse. And I had to kind of endure that on my own in a period of time when my mom was remarrying and she just trusted her mom to take good care of her kids. And it ended up not being that at all. Yeah. And so me and my brother was 3 years old at the time. So the age that my son is now, we suffered a lot in those years. And I just knew, Emily, as young as I was, I knew that we didn't deserve that. I knew that I wasn't doing anything worth getting punished the way that I was getting punished. I knew that I was a good kid, that I was doing my job as a student and performing well academically, that I was doing everything that I could to be, in my childhood kind of sense, to be loved and to be liked and to be appreciated and valued. And it didn't matter. And that was, as a child, it was very difficult to understand. I didn't get it. We lived with a cousin who was a few years younger than me. And the kinds of things that they would say, oh, poor him, he doesn't have a dad. And I'm like, I didn't have a dad. My biological father was an abusive, you know what, not nice words. So that's not what makes us different. And his mom, so my aunt, was out trying to do something better with her life. So was my mom. So I didn't, like, to me, from a rational standpoint, I didn't really see how is it that we're so different? We're not. And we're kids, and no child, as young as I was, I knew that no child deserved to be treated the way that we were treated, especially not my brother, because he was so much younger. I mean, when we think of waterboarding, we think of, war, we think of, and my brother would get waterboarded. And me witnessing that and not being powerless, the kind of abuse that we would have was very, very militaristic, had an alcoholic grandfather who, whenever he didn't do well gambling or whatever, he would come home in the middle of the night and wake me up and grab me with a belt and hit me until I had bleeding welts on my skin. I was 10 years old. Those are the kinds of things that when people start learning that part of my life and those stories and those memories, they look at me and they go, I would have never imagined that.
No.
Because the way that, and this goes back to the confidence, the way that I am as a person has been, even at the worst of times, there's been this deep belief that there's something better for me. And I don't know where that comes from, Emily.
How is he doing?
He committed suicide. So actually yesterday would have been his 36th birthday. And this year in May 17th is when he died, will be 18 years since his death. And he committed suicide at 18. So he would be past as long as he was alive. And so this year is a little, it's a little like, I remember, and that was, that kind of grief is a different kind of trauma, certainly. But I also know that a lot of his turmoil was as a result of that. It was as a result of kind of feeling like he didn't deserve to be loved. Like he had a biological father, our biological father, who didn't want anything to do with us, who, quite frankly, attempted to induce a miscarriage when my mom was pregnant with both of us. So that kind of, in a way, when I learned that for myself, I was like, wow, this is interesting. I've had this fighter spirit, and I've had her as my guardian to protect me ever since I was in the womb, quite literally.
That's amazing. It's that the way you've turned out and your confidence and everything. I don't know that I would be that way.
Yeah. And I think, Emily, one of the biggest things that I can reflect on is, again, being 10 years old and recognizing that I didn't deserve this. No child deserves this.
No.
And more than that, this like very, very deeply held belief and commitment that I would always strive to be kind. Always. And I think that kindness is partly what gives me a lot of my inner strength, but also that belief in myself. I know that even though I am an imperfect human like we all are, I know that I always strive to be kind. And I have as a result developed since very early on this perspective, this very deep empathy for others, as well as this perspective that we make a lot of assumptions about people from the right? It's a very human thing. You see a new person and you're just like, up and down, and social media makes that so much worse.
Yes.
Of who you are and who this person is by the way that they look, by the kind, their haircut, their attire, their expression, on and on. And to me, it's one of those things that allowed me to kind of like really also fall into anthropology, which is the suspension of judgment. Suspending judgment is not something that we do automatically. It's something that we actively as humans have to do. It's just that for me, I've been practicing it a lot longer without realizing it. Like I said, that's just something that I recognize like in the past few years. I was like, so that's been my process. Okay, got it. And part of that is, it's kind of funny. It's something that I learned when I was in third grade. My homeroom teacher, I wish I could remember her name. I remember her face so clearly. And I have this mental block that does not allow me to remember her name. Mrs. G. Don't remember her last name. But she
You remember a lot more about your childhood than I remember about mine. So yeah, it's okay that you can't remember her name.
So she had on the homeroom board this sign that said, "Be a star." And STAR was an acronym for Stop, Think, Act, Review. And Emily, that, I don't know why it stuck with me, but it did. And it's been part of my process for as far back as I can remember, unconsciously, but it's been part of my process. That ability to simply stop.
Yep.
To stop before you respond and you're angry, to stop before you make any judgment, to stop before you, it's part of my skill set, it's part of my strength, it's part of my empathy too. I realize, I can very honestly say, that has been probably the single most important driver of me really not being a judgmental person.
Well, Deb says your strength is admirable, and I agree. And I was wondering, I wonder if you could reach out to that teacher again and just.
I know, which is why I was like, the day that I remember her name.
Yeah. But maybe another friend, or just if you know the school, reach out to the school, because that would really make her day to see.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, to see how that impacted your life this long.
It's these things, that goes back to, how people made you feel. And she was actually, that is part of it, I realized too. She was one of the first, let's say, strangers, people outside of my family, that I felt loved me. I felt embraced me as a person, embraced me as a child, that wasn't punitive, pretty much the background that I had. She was just kind. She was just this beautiful, like, big-hearted, just presence. And it wasn't just for me, it was for other kids too. And there was something about it. I felt safe. And honestly, I know that was part of the impact, is that feeling of, I'm safe here. I'm safe here with this person. I'm safe here in this space. So a lot of that, it's like the Maya Angelou quote, right? People won't remember what you said or what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And it's true. It's true. It was impactful for that reason, because at that time of my life, that sense of safety is something that I didn't have. And it just stuck. And her kindness stuck as well, right? It was almost like an additional layer of, this is who I want to be, and that commitment.
It's so important for someone who grew up like you did to see kind people, even if they weren't in your immediate family, but to see them at school and to see them as role models. Yeah.
Especially because they weren't in my immediate family. Because there's a sense, as a kid, this, and not that it's an unrealistic expectation, but this expectation that your family is supposed to be your support and your safety and your place of love. So when you kind of, as I couldn't quite understand, I knew it wasn't right, but I just couldn't understand the why behind it.
Yeah.
There's still like this need to be loved and to be validated by your family. And when somebody outside of your family then actually gives you that which you have been seeking and which you feel is what's supposed to happen, it's very confronting, because it then makes you think like, well, so wait, she loves, is it because she's just a great person, which she was. Yeah. She was to be, to give that kindness and that love to her students. And at the same time, it still almost makes the family side worse, because you're like, how is it that I'm not getting this from the place where I am supposed to be getting it from?
Yeah. Yeah.
And same thing after when my mom remarried, it was the same thing with my stepfather. So he's my dad, call him my dad. And when he and my mom married, he met me and my brother, and he simply took us in as his own. And it was strange, because I thought, why? Like, I don't know you. You don't know me. Like, and I was very angry at the time too. I was incredibly angry, because the way that my grandmother, my mom's mom, kind of put this whole situation of the reason why she didn't want me and didn't want me around, and was because, oh, your mom just left you here. And it wasn't quite accurate, but she felt like, she got left with a responsibility that wasn't hers.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when we don't examine those feelings as adults, it's too easy to put it onto kids. And the way that I was kind of told was like, this is, your mom's fault for leaving you here and she abandoned you. And so that was part of the emotional abuse that happened during that time. So I had a lot of anger towards like just the situation and what I was going through and my mom and, being away with, this new person. So there's a lot of jealousy as a kid. Yeah. And that was understandable. But then, and so what was really confronting then was here I am like all jealous of him, but then like he like completely embraced and welcomed me and my brother, and I didn't know what to do with that. I had no idea.
How old were you?
I was 11 at the time.
Yeah.
11, 12, yeah.
That's awesome that he took you guys in.
Well, so, it was interesting because, like I said, I didn't know what to do with that. And my brother, who was so little, like called him dad very soon, but he's not your dad. I was so angry. And then one day, not very long after, it just slipped. Like, I asked him for something and I said, hey, Dad, like as a kid, I was like, oh, how did that slip out? Like total Freudian slip, right? And when I said that, when those words escaped, he started crying. Oh. And that was for me, Emily, I was like, wow, this is legitimate love. This is real love. I don't understand this, but I understand, right? And he had, so he and my mom had 2 more kids, and my siblings. He never made a distinction between his own kids and mine. And it's something that I always commend in him, like as a hero. Like that's not a quality that a lot of people can have.
No,
they just don't.
I agree with you.
And so for me, I'm like, wow, that was such a gift that I still, like as recently as like a month ago, we've had these conversations and he kind of like reiterated this. Before your brother and sister, it was just you and Andres. You were my first loves in the family. You are my children. And I was like, oh, like even as an adult, I'm like, okay.
That's awesome. When you suggested this title for the podcast, you said, embrace yourself, unleash your true power. So I kind of copied that and put it into the meeting, the notice for this event. And then I thought, oh my gosh, she spelled yourself with your and self in 2 separate words. Should it be together? And, then I contacted you. You're like, no, I meant it to be yourself. So you want to talk about that? Because the title of this is Embrace Yourself, Unleash Your True Power.
So honestly, like it goes back to everything that I've kind of touched upon so far, Emily, which is, it is the difference between existing and going through the motions of being a human and like following the steps that, and the path that everybody thinks is right for you and what they think are your aptitude, everything from like the assessments that you do for, a career or your personality test or all of these things, to all of those things have some nugget of truth. But the real truth of who you are comes from a different kind of exploration into yourself, into the essence of who you are, and very intentionally separating the self, right? Because we don't learn how to do that. And I am 42 years old, and I will say that there are different pieces of me that I've known throughout my life that are me. But until you let go of the conditioning, until you really separate the self from the conditioning, from the others, from the expectations, from culture, you don't really understand the essence of who you are.
I get that. So you're 42, right? I'm 57. And I went to the Naval Academy and I started there at age 17. And then I worked for the Navy for 38 years. And, when you're working for the Navy or, any employer, but, I was an officer in the Navy and then a civilian. And, they invest in your training, but the training that they invest in is all for you to do a better job at work. It's not for you to learn about yourself. And then when I retired, I wanted to invest in a few coaches and I saw the prices. I'm like, that's a lot of money, because I had never really invested in myself before. Mm-hmm. And I started to do it. I got over my money issues. I started to do it. And I've just changed so much in the 18 months since I retired, learning more about who I am, because no one's going to teach you that until you decide to go on that journey for yourself.
Absolutely. And you have to be ready. And it's scary. There's a sense of like, I really want to know who I am.
Right. I'll just
and it's also, because you've been on autopilot, and that just like existing is just for a lot of people. And I I don't begrudge them this. To me, it's paradoxical, and it doesn't make sense to me because of who I am. I'm constantly seeking getting out of my comfort zone. I know when I feel discomfort, that is a place of growth. That is just like, I know now what that feels like. I am very attuned to my body and my body's reaction when there's something that is like scary as hell. And immediately I'm like, oh, okay, I feel the anxiety coming. What is it about this that I am afraid of? What could I possibly learn about myself by actually doing this?
Right.
And constantly transcending those boundaries. Constantly.
That's what I've been doing, because it's scary, but it's also, you feel expansive, right? It's like, I got to figure that out. I got to figure that out. I got to go to the next step. Yeah. And because I was living unintentionally. I was just going through the motions, and I didn't catch that about myself. I didn't like wake up until I was in my 50s. And I'm like, there's got to be something else. I want to know more about myself. There's got to be more to life. There's got to be more to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that for a lot of people, the pandemic was kind of one of those places where you had to. There was such a huge disruption to your autopilot.
Right.
That it kind of forces you to think, am I doing with my life what I want to do? Is this life? Right. Is this the life that I want more than that? And so like just those questions that are very confronting is like, oh, now I have to think about that. Okay, wait, hold on. I got a choice here. I can really go with this and be uncomfortable and try to make sense of what this means. Or I can just be like, I cannot wait until normal life starts and I get back to my job and I do the things, because you know what? Then you don't have to think about it. It's hard work.
It is hard work. I think also what made me decide to do some of that hard work is 6 months after I retired, my kid's dad died, and we weren't married at the time, but I mean, he was my kid's dad, and I became executor of the estate, and I was there when he died, and so were my kids. And I know that he had regrets. And I know that he didn't do that work. He didn't really know himself, and he was living unintentionally, and he was getting ready to retire, but he wasn't retired yet. And I just thought, that's not how I want to live. There's so much more to life. I want to figure things out.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things, Emily, that like immediately comes up for me in thinking about like my own growth is, I mean, I'm very growth oriented, super growth oriented. I recognize now how rare that is. And it was hard for me to recognize that because it's just kind of one of those things like, doesn't everybody do this? Yeah. Really? Like people don't like stop and think about like, the essence of their life. And I'm like, yes, they don't. Okay, cool. Now that I can recognize that it's actually rare. B, it's probably rare because we don't learn the skills to do that. And 3, it's scary. It's scary to look into yourself. It's scary because you don't just look at the nice parts. You have to look at the parts that you don't necessarily really want to look into.
Yeah.
It's holding that proverbial mirror to everything that you are, the good, the bad, the ugly. And also there's a very important aspect of looking within and moving beyond your boundaries, which requires self-acceptance, and self-compassion, and self-love. And those are they're endangered. It's not endangered, but they're languages.
Yeah.
Right. That we have too much of in our society when we think about, for example, self-care. When we think about actually looking within, that somehow it's selfish, especially as women. It's looking outwards and taking care of everybody else. That's what we're supposed to do. But it's interesting because once you actually give yourself that time, take some of that energy that normally goes outward and put it to yourself, you actually become not just better for yourself, you become better for everybody else too.
A better person. Yeah. Thank you, Tracy, Kim, Deb, Thomas, Bernard, all you guys for tuning in to this. Yeah, you do. And sometimes it's just like the little things that I notice. Like, here's just a tiny example. It may seem crazy, but just a tiny example. Like today, I've been practicing mindfulness, which I never really practiced before. And for a while, before I retired, I was on fluoxetine, which is kind of like a Prozac, to help with things. But today I go out to start my car to go to the pool because I wanted to get my swimming in, and my car didn't start. The battery was dead. And then I finally got someone to come and fix the battery, and they were late. So they could only be here at 1:00, which is right when I had a podcast interview today at 1. And there's been a time in my life when all of that throw me off kilter would have gotten me so friggin' stressed out. And I was just like, okay, I took it in flow. And sometimes it's just those little things that you notice like, wow, I am changing because I'm not on that net anymore. And I'm not reacting to circumstances anymore. The stuff that happens is not going to impact me because I'm better inside.
Exactly. So that part of again, going back to knowing yourself is also as far as what are the things that are triggering me? What are the things that make me uncomfortable? Where do I tend to, what are my unconscious habits as I get stressed about certain things? And then two, what are the ways in which I self-soothe and maybe am not aware of it?
Glass of wine every night, piece of whatever. I mean, that's keeping you from facing those feelings or really doing that work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it's kind of a way of avoiding the things that are actually at the core of how you're reacting. And it's kind of digging into, okay, let me get a different understanding of this so that I can make different choices, or more consciously, I could just keep making the same choice too. Right. But it's in your field of awareness. And to your point, Emily, that for me, thinking back of this transition out of academia, which was such a huge struggle for me, of there was just so much time invested in going to school, and I'm still paying for college, which is a lot of college students and a lot of professionals struggle with. Stepping away to something that's more fulfilling is the financial commitment, that investment that you just feel so tied to it and so guilty stepping away from it because you're still paying for this, what feels like a mistake, even though it's not. It's too easy to see it that way. It's much harder to really dig into what was important about that experience for me? What did I gain from it? How can I use it in the future? But just feeling being an academic and being a scholar was such a big part of who I thought I was.
Yeah.
Because I'm a smart girl. That's what I was taught to be. That's what was acceptable for me, was being smart, was excelling academically. And I did it. And then I did it and I got to the highest level that I could. And it wasn't the thing. And again, this goes back to but wait, something's off here.
How you got a PhD and all that. So you're not allowed to leave and go do something else. You've got to stay and finish your paying for your degree, but you left, right?
And you're supposed to go to tenure track position, and you're supposed to publish, and you're supposed to do all these things. And the thing that I loved about it was teaching. And that is not what gets rewarded in academia. And so there was this publications I love writing. I don't like having to write to get tenured though. And I hate competing with other people. I am somebody who elevates others. That is how I get my kicks, is I see the potential in people and I see the good in people. And so I want to be this is great work. How can I help you to just do your thing? And that lack of collaboration was very stifling for me. My creative flow happens by this that we're doing, by engaging with each other, by talking about shared experiences, by talking about our visions of the future for your company, for your life, for whatever. That's what energizes me. That's where my gift is. And realizing oh wait, this is my gift, my power. My power, when it comes down to it, is this combination of self-mastery, which again, I just didn't realize that I have done this all my life, and recognizing now, I'm I've been doing this a long time. That makes sense why I feel like I've mastered this part of myself, and transcending those boundaries because I'm constantly willing to get out of those comfort zones, and the gift of seeing potential in others. That gift that I have, my confidence is not from, a lot of people compare themselves to others and what they want to achieve based on what they see others do, their view of success when they look at somebody else. And I guess that's not how I look at myself.
Yeah.
And that's why I am inadvertently confident. Like a lot of people come to me and they always, for years and years, like you just, you just have this drive and this fire and like, you're just like, you do it all and you do it all well and you have no, and I'm like, yeah, I guess when you say it that way, when you say it that way, I could see how that looks easy. I think the part that is not is having to, in being true to myself, is doing things that are kind of counterculture, that are nonconformist. For me, my area of practice as a person and as a professional is nonconformity. It's letting go again of those expectations. And I recognize that in looking at, through coaching and helping my clients, it's really all about understanding what are their expectations based on external measures.
Yeah.
And then when you actually look at yourself, who you are, uncorrupted from everything else, that's when you get at what's really important for you. And it's peeling layers, just peeling layers and layers until you get at that gem that is you.
Yeah, because so many people are living lives that don't bring them excitement, that aren't lives that they love, that are what other people say they should be doing. And then sometimes people are a little nervous to dream about like, what could they do? And then they think, well, I couldn't because of limiting beliefs. I don't think I could do that. And that's not possible. But wait, what if it could be possible? How would you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's fun to work with clients and then see them realize, oh, yeah, I could do that. And then see them light up and to see their lives change.
To see them actually like take action on those things that are actually theirs, that essence of who they are. And that, but it requires this, like, we don't even want to say what our dreams are sometimes because there's this like fear of like, it's never going to happen. Like, what's the point? What's the point of this exercise? And when you let it go, when you actually just articulate it and you have somebody to help you see like how you've closed yourself off to that possibility, that's when you actually reflect on, oh, wait, so this really is possible? It's kind of a little bit of a disbelief, but then there's also this freeing up in this energy of, oh, wait, maybe I can't do this. And well, what would it look like if I do this? And then, this can actually look pretty good. Where do I start?
This is how we could make it work. Yeah. And then they start to see that. And then when we get to be like my husband was, where my ex-husband, where we will all be when we're in our last days, we know we went for it.
Exactly. I think of both this gift that I have as well as the tools that I have as a coach and an anthropologist. If I had to like articulate like a sentence that really details, I guess, what I feel like I do as a coach, especially for younger people, is I want to save you 10 to 20 years of you not doing what you really want to do because of any number of reasons that you're telling yourself, I actually want you to be happy now and to work towards your dreams now and not 20 years from now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's really what I want to do. And that starts with having a belief in yourself.
Yeah.
Really knowing who yourself is. And that confidence, that's really what it is. It's trusting yourself.
Right.
It's trusting yourself. But first you need to know who yourself is.
Yeah. That's awesome. Great way to end this episode. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me, Emily. It's been great. And when we talked about like what we're going to talk about, I think we kind of went with like let's just see how this goes organically. And I feel like at different things that I've talked about all kind of point to the same thing, which is the things that I've learned about who I am and who I am not, and what the nots are and where they come from. And as an anthropologist, I knew that it was understanding the cultural dynamics of those things, of those messages of who we are supposed to be and not supposed to be, not just in our culture, but in other cultures as well. And you can add religion, you can add any number of things, gender, sexuality, and just really wanting to understand that because it's fascinating, but really at the core is because it gave me a better understanding of all of those external layers of who I'm not and understanding the inner core of who I am.
You're born pure, and then all these layers of expectations and experiences and all that get added on and on and on. And you got to kind of go back again and get to the bottom of it, of who you really are. And it's a journey. It's like a never-ending journey.
It is like, and it's just leveling up yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Margie.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you for listening today. And Margie, thank you for being my guest on the Onward podcast. To my listeners, if you don't already work with a coach, I highly recommend that you consider it. I've interviewed lots of different coaches on this podcast. And the key to finding a good coach is to find one that you resonate with, one that you feel like you can really relate to. We all are different. We all have different experiences. Although Margie and I coach in some of the same areas, she's a mental fitness coach as well. I have a military background. She has a different kind of a background, which you heard all about today. If you want to make a change in your life, if you want to experience self-mastery, if you want to empower yourself to really live a life that you love, I highly recommend working with a coach. You can check out the show notes for information on how to reach Margie and how to reach me. And I hope that you do reach out to one of us or one of the many other coaches that I've interviewed on the Onward podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And as always, if you would leave a review on Apple Podcast, I would be forever grateful. Have a wonderful summer. I hope that you get to take a vacation, get to spend time with family and friends, get some time away from your devices and the computer, and just be out in nature and take some time to really consider, are you living the life that you want to live, or are there changes that you want to make in your life?
Yesterday.